Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, July the 1st, 2025. Happy July! And in this video, I will indeed be talking about the first day of July, looking at the astrology and the I Ching for this day. I also want to consider the horoscope of New York politician Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for no special reason. I mean, she is always in the news, but there is one news story that has been quite prominent recently has been this question about where was she brought up. I mean, she was born in the Bronx, but someone was saying, well, she spent her early years in the suburbs, and that might sort of diminish her Bronx girl reputation. But I mean, it's a rather trivial dispute, but I do actually think it might actually link up with some of the stuff going on in her chart at the moment. But before I look at AOC, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today. So here is the chart for today, set for noon, July the 1st, 2025 in New York. No particular reason why it has to be New York, but I have to go for somewhere. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So looking at the chart, we see that at noon in New York, the moon is in Virgo. So for most of the day, perhaps even all the day, the moon is in Virgo. So the moon actually moves into Libra at 16 minutes past 10 in the evening if you're in London. So in Europe, late this evening, there is that sign change for the moon. If you're in the Americas, then this afternoon the moon moves out of Virgo and into Libra. But overall, it is a moon in Virgo day, and the moon, while it's in Virgo, it makes a trine to Venus and it makes a trine to Uranus. So you can see that there is a Venus-Uranus conjunction forming. Now that Venus-Uranus conjunction will be exact in a few days' time. And so with the moon trine Venus, moon trine Uranus, it might bring a certain amount of excitement, moon trine Uranus. It's also quite a stabilizing aspect. I mean, maybe not the Uranus part, but the moon trine Venus is good for relationships. It's good for getting on with people. And although Uranus is involved, we have to remember that this trine takes place in earth signs. So moon in Virgo, Venus in Taurus, even Uranus in Taurus. It doesn't have the instability and craziness as if this trine was in fire signs. So in spite of Uranus, it might actually be quite a stabilizing influence, moon trine Venus. And if you want to sort something out, perhaps regarding other people, or even regarding sort of money, or you might want to buy clothes today. I'm not suggesting you spend a lot of money on clothes, but maybe moon trine Venus is a time to be thinking about what you look like. And moon in Virgo is a placement which has got a fine eye for detail. So I do think that moon trine Venus is a fortunate influence. Now, the moon does eventually move into Libra, and things do change when the moon makes that sign change, because the moon makes an opposition to Saturn and it makes an opposition to Neptune. So late in the day, things could become more difficult, especially if you're in the Americas, because if you're in the Americas this afternoon, moon changes sign, then straight away it makes that opposition to Saturn, and you've got a situation where you might feel yourself coming down to earth, or you might come across something holding you back. I mean, I wouldn't worry about it too much, because it's the moon, and the moon does move quite quickly. Additionally, we have got Venus conjunct the fixed star Algol. Of course, Algol has a rather difficult reputation. It is supposedly the worst fixed star in the book. It is the head of the demon. It's associated with the Medusa's head. And so what does it actually mean for Venus to be conjunct Algol? Well, that might indicate that despite one's best efforts, there is some unpleasantness. And I do associate Algol with jealousy. And so you might be aware of jealousy, or you might feel that you're not being properly appreciated. And so there could be something just ever so slightly poisonous about the environment. I mean, I don't want to make too much of a big thing, but Algol is Algol, and this may say something about other people and what they present and how they behave. And in certain situations with Venus conjunct Algol, it would be a bad idea to do anything dangerous, and also to show off. I think showing off would be a bad idea with Venus conjunct Algol, because there is this potential link with jealousy. But it shouldn't take away from the fact that we do have the Moon trine Venus, and Moon trine Venus, it is a great aspect. So turning to the picture in Sydney, Australia, as a representative of Australasia and East Asia. So the Moon at noon Sydney is at 20 Virgo. So the Moon is definitely applying to a trine of Venus. The Moon doesn't go into Libra at all if you're in Australasia, so you don't have to worry about Moon opposition Saturn. So it's a completely Moon in Virgo day, and sort of as the day gets underway, as morning turns to afternoon, you can feel the growing influence of that Moon trine Venus. And as I've just said when looking at New York, it's a fortunate aspect. And then there is the heliocentric view, looking at today from the viewpoint of the Sun. And the main thing to report is that square between the Earth and Mars. I've been talking about it every day, and I think that today it's as close as it's going to get. It is a fairly prolonged feature, because the Earth and Mars are going at roughly similar speeds. I mean, they're not, but because they are going at speeds which are close enough to mean that the aspect just continues day after day after day. And with the Earth square Mars, there's still some tension in the air, and people are trying to work out how best to assert themselves, and it's not always easy. And so that's an aspect that we do need to consider. And the question is, how do we look after our own interests? Or maybe we're just watching other people desperate to look after their own interests. And additionally, we have Mercury making a trine to Venus, and I think that Mercury trine Venus is a relatively fortunate aspect, and it's kind of connected with the Earth, because there is the Earth, and Mercury has just finished making a sextile to the Earth, and Venus is likewise is moving away from a sextile to the Earth. So that Mercury trine Venus with Earth kind of on its midpoint is possibly a great mitigator. So I've talked about the negative sides of Earth square Mars, but maybe with Mercury trine Venus there is a way to smooth things out or smooth things over. So if you find yourself in a dispute with someone or disagreeing with them, and it might feel that an argument is brewing, that Mercury trine Venus may perhaps allow you to calm things down. And also Mercury trine Venus is an aspect that is very talented. It allows you to show the world what you can do, and if you have artistic interests with Mercury trine Venus, then now might be a good time to talk about these interests, because I think people might be interested. So now it's time to look at today from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, July the 1st, 2025. Aries. Aries, it still feels as if there are things that just have to be done. I mean, you can't really get away from it. And, like yesterday, you have, a fair amount of energy. And if you believe that something is important, then you're going to be able to give it your best shot. And, additionally, you're going to be probably quite clever about it. Your mind is on reasonably good form, and you can think about what needs to be done and what needs to be explained. And additionally, we looked at the heliocentric picture. Earth is square Mars, so Mars is you, Earth is the planet on which you exist. And so with Earth square Mars, if you feel that you need to be assertive, if you need to sort of throw your weight around, I think that is very much something that you can do. But is it really necessary? One aspect we have today is a trine between the moon and Venus, and this Moon-Venus trine could actually help you, get on with people. You'll probably know what needs to be said, and if you make a special effort to be disciplined and reasonable, then I don't think that you'll cause too many problems, and people, by and large, are going to cooperate. And this Moon trine Venus, is not just a social aspect; it could have a financial dimension, and possibly it's a time when if you think about some aspect of your finances or something you're concerned about as far as money is concerned, again, you will know how to behave, and you'll know what to do, and you'll know what details matter, and that is the important point. You can't do everything. You can't focus on every single detail that exists. You have to just concentrate on what you can do today. And if you get your priorities right, Aries, then I think that you really can establish yourself, and additionally make yourself feel relatively secure. And with Moon trine Venus, there's no reason why relationships of all kinds can't work pretty well. Though don't forget that Venus is on the fixed star Algol, and sort of Algol might say something about another person and what another person is experiencing. And Algol can be about fear or dread, and so do think about another person's state of mind and what they're concerned about. People do get worried about Algol, even if they've never heard of Algol, and it just represents fear. And I've also said that it can indicate jealousy. Someone may be concerned about issues of jealousy. Are they the one who is jealous, or are they the victim of jealousy? And that might be something that you just want to explore. But overall, Aries, I think that relatively speaking, you are quite responsible today. You're aware of what can be done. You're aware of your limits, and you also know what needs to be said. You also know how to say it. So you could say that it's not a typically Aries day. I think you're going to be more restrained from usual, but you still do have a lot of energy, and I think that you'll know how to use that energy in a responsible and effective way. Taurus. Venus is still in your sign, and in one sense that's great. Venus is very strong. Venus is your ruler. It should be welcome that Venus is still in your sign, because it does give you strength, it gives you confidence, and it allows you to project yourself very effectively. And you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is making a trine to Venus. So with moon trine Venus, you're looking good, and you have a certain sense of fun, and in most cases people are going to like you. So enjoy this this first day of July. Yet Venus is on the fixed star Algol, and with Venus on Algol, there may be something bothering you. Something that you may not want to discuss, or you may be concerned about certain relationships, because with Venus conjunct Algol, you're perhaps aware of other people's faults and other people's darkness, as well as you might be aware also of your own darkness. And Venus conjunct Algol, might bring this to the surface. And when discussing Venus conjunct Algol, there might be issues of jealousy. Who's jealous of who? Do you feel that you are a victim of jealousy, or perhaps you're jealous yourself? I mean, we all get jealous sometimes. It's not an unnatural feeling to have. So if you are jealous of someone for whatever reason, admit it to yourself, and don't be ashamed of this fact. Bring it out into the open. Don't lose your head about it, because losing your head can be something we associate with Algol, because Algol represents the Gorgon, and it wasn't her head cut off. But we don't want to take that analogy too far. But with this Venus conjunct Algol, there might be some other dangers. Don't take today too lightly, and it's probably not a good time to be taking risks. And additionally, Venus is starting to move towards a conjunction to Uranus in a couple of days' time. It will be exact. And so Venus conjunct Uranus, it may be that you're seeing that the pace of things is getting faster, and it might be exciting, but it might be troubling, especially now. Venus conjunct Algol conjunct Uranus, you're wondering what is going to happen next, where is this all leading? And also, Taurus, I just think that you are aware at the moment of what's happening around you, not in your immediate sphere, not about your home and your family, but just where you live, your community, your city, and you're very aware of how things are going wrong. Not your fault, maybe the people running your city or your community or even your country, you're aware of all of this, and that might contribute to a feeling of, I was going to say a feeling of dread. But it's not really a feeling of dread. Perhaps that's too strong, but we all sometimes feel this feeling of dread that things are not going to get better, that there's something out there that we haven't fully understood. Though Venus is going to change signs soon enough, and it will, in a few days' time, Venus will be out of Taurus. It will no longer be conjunct Algol. It will no longer be conjunct Uranus, and so maybe those feelings of concern will start to dissipate. Gemini. Gemini, for much of the day, perhaps even all of the day, there are no planets in air signs except for Pluto. And so you might say that today is not necessarily great for the average Gemini, but it may just be feeling that you are like a fish out of water, the twins out of water, or twins out of air, however you want to see it. And so don't necessarily feel that the usual strategies are going to work, but also don't be dispirited if your environment seems alien. Perhaps there are things you want to say, there are things you want to communicate, and you're just concerned that no one's going to listen, or no one's taking you seriously enough, perhaps on an intellectual level. And it does happen, and maybe Gemini, it's just a time when you need to just continue to relax and muster up what resources you have, and stability matters, and maybe it's a time to just stay in one place. It's not going to last forever, but that might be the right approach. And you shouldn't forget that there might be a lack of air, but it's not going to last forever because Venus is about to move into Gemini in a few days' time. Venus will be in your sign, and I think that is going to be a great relief for you. And also, the moon is about to move into Libra. Libra is an air sign, and if you're in the Americas this afternoon, moon will be in Libra. If you're in Western Europe, then late this evening, moon will enter Libra, and with moon entering Libra, things will be a lot easier, and you'll find that you're more familiar with whatever is going on, and you might feel that you're in a better position to actually take the initiative. But the question is, should you be doing anything today? You might want to. So some Geminis, in fact many Geminis, will feel that just something has to be done, that you want to take action, and you are ready to take action, almost ready to take action. And so some Geminis, might be impatient. What is holding everything back? And if you are feeling impatient, then I think it might be best to wait. Think about what you would like to do. And I think a lot of Geminis, you really are feeling like that. You've got an unresolved situation, and it's really bugging you. You want to resolve it. You can resolve it by taking a dramatic initiative. But if you were to try to resolve something too early, it might not work. And, there will be a first feeling of relief as you do take this big initiative. Then you have to see the consequences. And the consequences might not necessarily be fortunate. So a pause might be a good idea. And, things are, as I've said, in the process of changing. And, tomorrow, when the moon is in Libra, well, moon could be in Libra today, depending on your time zone. But when the moon is in Libra, and when the moon is past the opposition of Saturn, you'll be able to look at things in a new way. And also tomorrow we've got a first quarter moon, and so that first quarter moon, is something I'm going to be talking about in my horoscopes for Wednesday. But it's going to affect all the 12 signs. But that first quarter moon, it might well be the call for action, as I will discuss in my horoscopes for Wednesday. Cancer, you have a lot to say, a lot to communicate, and I think for much of the day you should be able to enjoy people's company. You just come over as a pleasant person. People will like you. And one reason for that is that we've got the moon making a trine to Venus, and with the moon trine Venus, your ability to get on with people is just going to be really good. may not be always dramatic, but you'll know what to say. You'll be a good listener, and from an emotional perspective, people will just naturally be attracted to you. And additionally, there will be something about you. But it is quite exciting. It's quite interesting because the moon doesn't just make a trine to Venus, it also makes a trine to Uranus. So moon trine Uranus, it really does seem that you've got something to offer, and some of the things you say can give people pause for thought. Pleasantly, you point something out, but perhaps no one has thought about before, and that can change everything. But it's all very gentle, and so Cancer, you are a good person to have around. Now, towards the end of the day, certainly if you're in the Americas, there is a change. The moon does move out of Virgo and into Libra. Now, that movement into Libra takes place, for example, if you're in New York, I think that would, or the eastern coast, the east coast, that would be 5:16 in the afternoon. That would be 2:16 in the afternoon if you're on the west coast, or if you're in California or British Columbia. And so with the moon moving into Libra, things might become more serious, and you might feel that there's less scope for doing things, and perhaps you have to look after yourself more. And it might occur to you that maybe you can't be friends with everyone, because what does happen is that when the moon moves into Libra, it makes an opposition to Saturn, and it also makes an opposition to Neptune. And so moon opposition Saturn, suddenly you might move on to the defensive. Now, this is going to happen later if you're in Europe. It will happen this evening, perhaps even late this evening. I don't know what you're doing this evening, if anything, if you're in Europe, but as you move towards the end of the day, towards midnight, that Moon-Saturn opposition starts to become strong. After all, the moon is moving into Libra, and so it just could become just more complicated. So this may be Cancer, whether you're in Europe or the Americas. In both cases, if you've got something you want to do of any importance, perhaps you should try and do it earlier in the day, and that's especially the case if it relates to other people. So if you've got people to talk to, or if you want to have meetings, the earlier the better, because even while the moon is in Virgo, it's still getting closer and closer to that opposition to Saturn, and that opposition to Saturn could well say something about relationships, and it just might be occurring to you that maybe you and another person, you don't entirely get on with each other, at least in the short term. There's some area of conflict. Now, it might be a passing area of conflict. In other words, if there's someone you care about, maybe you should just stay out of their way, and just until tomorrow, until the Moon-Saturn opposition has passed. So that might be one approach. But sometimes with Moon opposition Saturn, you're dealing with a situation you can't avoid. It might even be a good thing to have a confrontation, perhaps. But I think, by and large, in most cases, confrontations should be avoided. And this might be a case in which you do have a certain amount of choice. And so, concentrate on what makes you feel comfortable, and perhaps when the moon does move into Libra, whenever that might be, whether it's this afternoon if you're in the Americas, whether it's late this evening in Europe, or even tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand, when the moon does move into Libra, that might be a time when you just want to just back off and take stock of whatever might be going on. Leo, right now you are a person who has authority. You might not feel that you have authority. In fact, you probably don't. At the moment, Leo, you might be of a view that no one's really listening to you, that your opinions might not count for very much, and you might not want them to account for very much. You may just you may prefer to just do your own thing, not attract any attention. But if you do make an effort to explain yourself and to express your opinions, then I think you'll start to recognize that you are taken seriously. You see things that other people don't, and in your own quiet way, you may actually be able to exercise, a degree of leadership. So, don't be lazy. And if you see an opportunity to be taken seriously, then I would, strongly suggest that you actually take that opportunity. And you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is making a trine to Venus. This moon trine Venus I would regard as being, a fortunate aspect for Leos, and it does allow you to get noticed, especially if you've got something definite to offer. When I say offer, I'm really talking about opinions and advice, if you've got a view. And I suspect, Leo, you have a very clear view about how things should be arranged and organized and conducted. And if you're prepared to express that view, I think that people will listen to you. And that especially applies if you're working, if you're going into work, if you have a business, or indeed if you're interacting with authority figures. Your view does matter. So don't, whatever you do, be overawed by another person's authority. You might think that someone, has more authority from you. You might think that it's not for you to say anything. You better keep your mouth shut. That's not the right approach. If you have an opinion, then you should express it, because people do want to hear it. And I think that you can really come over as someone who has real gravitas. So it may not be an exciting day, Leo, but it's certainly a day when you can get noticed, and also get respected. And additionally, Leo, you come over actually as being quite an attractive and charismatic person. And you might feel you're being ignored, but you're not being ignored. And it would be quite unnecessary for you to be sidelined. So, in fact, it can actually be quite a powerful day for you, provided you're able to take the initiative. And so you could say, Leo, that really it is up to you, and don't be afraid of discussing things of a financial or material nature. Your understanding of money is actually pretty good at the moment, and you will understand, what details matter. And maybe you don't always understand what details matter, but right at the moment, you really do seem to know what's going on. And so this means that if you're working with your own money, then probably you'll be able to make the right decisions. And so again, it's another situation where it's very important that you don't underestimate yourself. Virgo, the moon is still in your sign. It is going to leave it pretty soon. I mean, this afternoon, if you're in the Americas, the moon moves into Libra, out of Virgo. If you're in Europe, then late this evening, the moon leaves Virgo. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, well, you've got the moon in Virgo, all day long. And the moon, while it's in Virgo, does make a trine to Venus, and it makes a trine to Uranus. These aspects, are really very fortunate, and they allow you to really engage with other people, and you know how to behave, and you'll know what matters, and that's important. So some things really are irrelevant. You don't need to discuss them, and they can be left for later. But there are other things which are essential, and you'll know what they are. And additionally, Virgo, it's important that you're adventurous. The moon, it makes a trine to Venus, but it also makes a trine to Uranus. And so that moon trine Uranus, can get you in touch with sort of interesting things. So if you come across something that seems unusual, even alien, then you shouldn't necessarily ignore it, because it actually has something to offer you, but you're not going to know unless you find out, unless you're ready to ask questions. And once you ask questions, you get you find out what you're dealing with. You may see that this is a real opportunity, and today in general may be a day of opportunity, because it does seem that right now you have a lot of energy at your disposal, and the question is, how do you use this energy? I think I suggested when I did your reading for sort of the yesterday for Monday, that you might have some negative thoughts. There could have been quite a lot of negativity, actually, but you're able to now move beyond that and actually see the positives and be able to really make things happen. In fact, in some respects, Virgo, you've got more energy than anyone else at the moment. Might not feel like that, but once you actually give it a go, once you find something that really interests you, then you give it everything you've got, and you can actually see things happening, and you realize that you can be enthusiastic. And enthusiasm is perhaps an important word for Virgos, because Virgos can think too much, or they can analyze too much. And the trouble about analyzing something too much is that you lose your enthusiasm. You have to start thinking about it, and you have your doubts. But sometimes just sheer enthusiasm is something great, and Virgos do need moments of great enthusiasm. And so find something to be enthusiastic about, and remember, things are about to change astrologically. Venus is about to move into Gemini, and in fact Uranus is about to move into Gemini. I think in less than a week Uranus will be moving into Gemini, and I think those two sign changes are going to be great for Virgos. They're going to be really motivating and exciting, and perhaps you're just getting ready for it now, as your energy levels are starting to increase. Now, at some stage today, it's possible that the moon moves out of Virgo. I say possible because if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon is in Virgo all day long. But if you're in the Americas, the moon will leave Virgo this afternoon. If you're in Europe, then late this evening. And so when the moon moves out of Virgo, it might feel that there's a temporary lowering of your energy levels. The moon is no longer in your sign. It's in Libra. It's making an opposition to Saturn. And there may be moments towards the end of the day where you feel that you don't have the energy, or you're having to deal with something you don't want to have to deal with. And just important you just go through with it. Sometimes you just have to look beneath the surface, understand what is happening, ask questions about something you really don't want to know about. But if you ask questions, you get answers in the end, and when you get those answers, that renews your enthusiasm. And so what absolutely needs to be avoided is ignorance, because ignorance is holding you back. And ignorance could be holding you back. So if you don't know about something, make it your business to discover all the details, all the complexities. And once you've given yourself a knowledge, you'll realize that there are no limits. What perhaps was quite quite scary for you is actually nothing, and you can actually really move forward, and you can start preparing for Venus and Uranus moving into Gemini. Libra. Venus is your ruler, of course, and in one sense, Venus is well placed. It's in Taurus. It's in its own sign, and so with Venus in Taurus, I think that does put you in a strong position, and it puts you in a strong position emotionally, and hopefully over the last few weeks, as Venus has been moving through Taurus, you were able to sort of understand your emotions and perhaps be aware that you had a real emotional power and that you were able to really look after yourself. And now Venus is moving onto the fixed star Algol, and it happens every year. It might happen more than once if Venus goes retrograde. But with Venus conjunct Algol, there may be moments of fear, because Algol is a fixed star that has a pretty bad reputation. It's all about sort of malice, and of course it's symbolized by the Gorgon, Medusa losing her head. That head sort of covered in snakes, with hair is snakes, and that's not you, by the way. It's more about your feelings of fear, and it kind of links with Venus moving into Taurus, moving through Taurus, because with Venus moving through Taurus, it has been a time where you've had to sort of look at things in a new way, and you've perhaps had to go deeply into things that you probably didn't really want to have to worry about. And when you go deeply into something, you often discover things that you perhaps wish you hadn't discovered, and that might be how Venus conjunct Algol works. You see something for the first time, and you don't like what you see. And what is it that you see? Well, it might relate to other people. You perhaps start to become aware of another person's motivation, and you realize that it might not be very nice. You might be aware of someone's selfishness, or their greed, or even their jealousy. But it might also be an internal process with Venus conjunct Algol. You become aware of your own unpleasantness. We're all unpleasant, by the way. We've all got an unpleasant side to us. And if you do become aware of your own unpleasantness, your own inner Algol, then that's a good thing. Knowledge is always a good thing. And so you're actually starting to see yourself, for how you really are. And so that might be about sort of psychological integrity with Venus conjunct Algol. But it is absolutely possible that in certain situations you could be a target of jealousy, and you might not have been aware of it before. Of course, it depends what you're doing. But if you're successful at something, or you've got attributes that other people might aspire to, then jealousy might be around, and jealousy might actually explain certain people's actions. Now, the moon is making a trine to Venus, and I do think that this trine between moon and Venus is fortunate. It does work for you, and it possibly allows you to really take advantage of these insights. So even if an insight is disturbing or unpleasant, it does seem that there is actually a way of using it. You understand what is happening. You understand the overall situation, and because you have understanding, it means you can take clear and concrete decisions. I mean, a decision is the stage before an initiative. It's not like you actually have to do anything, but you can start to think about doing things, and some things might just become clear. It just becomes absolutely obvious, and it's becoming increasingly obvious. And just remember that Venus is not going to be conjunct Algol forever. Venus is now moving through the last few degrees of Taurus, and soon enough Venus will be in Gemini. And Venus moving into Gemini, I think for you will be a big relief, and you'll just start to see really what is available. And additionally, the moon is moving into your sign very soon. Now, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon will move into Libra tomorrow. If you're in the Americas, it's this afternoon. If you're in Europe, it will be late this evening. So moon in Libra does make you probably more dynamic, more decisive, and also more aware of the things that are holding you back, because the moon, when it moves into Libra, it straight away makes an opposition to Saturn. And so towards the end of the day or into tomorrow, as the moon makes that opposition to Saturn, it just may occur to you that someone or something is really holding you back. And once you're aware that they're holding you back, you actually have the ability to get around the problem. You'll straight away see, what needs to be done. So, don't give up. Don't think that you're dealing with an unmovable obstacle. Well, but the obstacle itself might not move, but there's always a way around it, as I think you'll discover over the next couple of days. Scorpio, today you are, I would have said, relatively friendly and sociable. I think that you're going to be enjoying people's company, and you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is making a trine to Venus. It's always good when the moon is trine Venus. And so if you want to get on with people, I do think that you can, and you're going to be friendly, and you'll know what to say. And in fact, once you start talking, there'll probably be no stopping you. You'll have lots of things to talk about, and you'll be able to tell everyone what's on your mind. And I think that in most cases, people are going to really be interested in what you have to say, and you're able to feel as well as talk. And so with moon trine Venus is about not just people in general, but it can be about relationships. And so with moon trine Venus, I think that you'll know how to solidify relationships, make them stronger, make them perhaps more powerful. And it is all about saying the right things, and people will listen, you'll listen. And so socially, I think things are looking good, certainly for most of the day, although it kind of depends where you are. Now, if you are in the Americas, then this afternoon there could be a change, and the reason for this change is because the moon is moving out of Virgo and into Libra, and so American Scorpios might start to slow down as the day gets underway. Not as the day gets underway, as certainly after lunch, things slow down, and by this evening, you're not going to really want to be so sociable, and you may feel that there are just other things that need to be done, and you probably are of a view that you can really do it on your own. And if you have to deal with other people, well, people might they might start the day as being a real plus in your life, but by the end of the day they could be a real drag on things. But that's the situation in America. I think that if you're in Europe or Australasia, Asia, then that moon trine Venus that I've been talking about, it's a feature. It's a feature of the whole day. Now, do think about other people and what they are experiencing, because Venus is conjunct Algol, And so, Algol, as we know, is a fixed star that can be really difficult. It can be unpleasant, and it can represent all sorts of strange and uncomfortable feelings. And this might say something about the people you're interacting with. So it's true that you can get on with people very well today, but at the same time, you perhaps need to be aware of what they are experiencing or what they're feeling. And Venus conjunct Algol could be about someone who is under stress, who is freaked out, maybe of a view that everything is about to collapse, because there is a sense of horror about Algol. Okay, maybe that's an exaggeration. There's also an association between Algol and jealousy. And so ask yourself, where does the jealousy lie? And is it someone who is jealous of you? Or are you jealous of them? Where is jealousy? Is there any jealousy today? Now, maybe there's no jealousy, and we don't want to create a problem out of nothing. But jealousy is a very human emotion. We all experience jealousy. We're all victims of jealousy. We are all capable of jealousy ourselves, and I think it's a good idea to be open about the potential for jealousy. And that might say something about what you want to communicate. While I think, Scorpio, you're going to be very good at talking and saying the right thing, you probably don't want to give too much information about yourself, especially your own achievements. So if you've done something that you're very proud about, very pleased about, and you want to tell the world about it, maybe you should just keep it to yourself for the moment. It may not be you. Maybe a member of your family's achieved something, and you want to tell the world about your family's achievements. Maybe the world doesn't want to hear, or maybe certain people don't want to hear, because there is an atmosphere of jealousy at the moment. And as a Scorpio, I think that jealousy is an emotion that you understand perhaps more than most people. Sagittarius, you believe that there are still things that need to be done, and probably you are of a view that you just need to keep going until the last moment, because there's always this danger that you might run out of time. And so Sagittarius, think about what needs to be done, and do get your priorities right. You haven't necessarily got all the time in the world. I mean, I know it's only a Tuesday. It's sort of still at the beginning of a week, though. Maybe in the Americas or maybe in the United States, things slow down in preparation for July the 4th, Independence Day. Well, of course, in the United States, kind of a week sort of ends pretty abruptly, because Friday is July the 4th, isn't it? So, if there is something that needs to be done, where regardless of whether you're in the United States or not, do get on with it. And if you feel that there's a hurry, then respect that, and make sure that you cover everything. And it's actually okay. It's okay to be single-minded, but you don't want to be so single-minded that you ignore things. Certain things which are important might just be, you might just want to sort of pass them by, and maybe it's members of your family or something to do with your home, and it's demanding your attention, wanting your attention, but you've got other things to do. You feel you've got other priorities, so don't ignore what you're being told, and don't ignore sort of subtle emotional hints that you need to have a more sort of inclusive view of the world. It's not just about getting ahead and making progress. You do have to think about the foundations of the matter. But if you get that balance right, I do think that you should be okay. And yeah, I must emphasize you are really single-minded at the moment. There are really things that you want to accomplish, and once you've decided you want to accomplish, it's going to be very difficult to stop you. And that can have advantages. It can also have some disadvantages. And one problem you might have is that although you are impatient, it might actually be difficult to actually communicate your desires to others. Yeah, you'll certainly be able to speak. The words will come out, but the words may have little or no impact. So it's not just you who is capable of ignoring important details. It's other people who are capable of just not hearing you. And so, don't rely on your ability to communicate. Now, that might mean that you just have to make a special effort to communicate properly, to use the right words. But it just may be a case where it's impossible to communicate, where everyone is sort of stuck in their ways and they don't really want to listen. So in that situation, it may just be up to you to make sure that everything happens, and you can't necessarily rely on other people. Yeah, you can tell them what to do, but if they don't ignore you, they might even misunderstand you and do something else. So that's another good reason, Sagittarius, for perhaps doing things on your own, or at least making sure that you are responsible for everything. Because if you trust another person, they could let you down. It really is possible. But your ability to get things together today, I think in general is going to be very good. And so, keep organizing, keep making sure that everything is as how you want it to be. And if you pay attention, it could be hard work trying to organize everything, being responsible for everything. But I do think that your hard work will pay off, provided you don't put yourself in a position where you are dependent on another person. Now, the moon does change sign today. Well, it does change sign this afternoon if you're in the Americas, late this evening if you're in Europe. That sign change is probably only really relevant if you're in the Americas, because the sign change is so late in Europe. But if you are in the Americas, moon does move into Libra, and as a result of this sign change, you might calm down. You might feel sort of more relaxed. Maybe you'll realize that you've completed everything, job done, and now you can maybe start to enjoy yourself. And that might be how you experience things this evening, or at least how you want to experience it. Remember, I'm only talking about the Americas, but the trouble is the moon does make an opposition to Saturn, and so late in the day, if you're an American Sagittarian, your efforts to do something special, to enjoy yourself, to meet up with people, may not actually work out. There could be more disappointment. So perhaps your social activities should wait until tomorrow, when the moon is past that opposition of Saturn. Capricorn, there's a lot of stuff in earth signs. We've got the moon in Virgo making a trine to Venus in Taurus, and that is a great aspect. In fact, the moon in Virgo makes a trine to Uranus in Taurus as well, because we've got a Venus-Uranus conjunction coming up, and the moon is making a trine to it. So you've got moon in Virgo, Venus and Uranus in Taurus, and of course that must inevitably have an influence on Capricorn, you being an earth sign. And so that does give things a boost. It creates some excitement, and you start to see new possibilities. And I think that, other people, your friends and your family, they're there for you. They're exciting, or they can be exciting, but not exciting in a way that is irresponsible. I think there is a sense that things are running according to a particular plan, and I don't think there are going to be unpleasant surprises. There could be surprises, but I think that there are surprises that are going to be sort of more fun rather than unsettling. So that does look good. And of course with Moon trine Venus, I think that relationships can be fulfilling. You'll be able to get on with most people. So that looks good. And additionally, you'll know what to say, and you'll be able to communicate in a way that really gets people's attention. And so you can forget all this Capricorn stuff. Capricorn has this reputation for being sort of staid and not doing anything to rock the boat. Yeah, you can rock the boat if you want, and you can do it through your words and your actions and your suggestions. So that, to my mind, looks really good. And I think that overall Capricorn, it can be an exciting day. Now, that might depend to some extent on where you are. Now, if you are in the Americas, then this afternoon the moon does change sign. The moon moves out of Virgo and into Libra. And that is an important sign change. And when the moon does move into Libra, I make it that the moon moves into Libra, at 5:16 p.m. in New York, or 2:16 p.m. in California or British Columbia, even earlier if you're in Hawaii or Alaska. But when the moon does change sign, then you might feel more of a Capricorn. You might feel more responsible. Yeah, you can have fun up to a point, but there are things that need to be done, even though it is late in the day. So you might suddenly start to take your various responsibilities seriously. Perhaps you'll feel that something you had ignored now needs to be brought back into focus. And it could be hard work, because the moon, when it moves into Libra, it does make an opposition to Saturn. And it could be challenging. It might be something you really don't want to do, but you feel you have to do it anyway. And if you're feeling challenged, then you might increasingly become a difficult person to deal with, and that could lead to a disagreement. But it needn't happen. Just be aware of that situation. Be aware of that sign change if you happen to be an American Capricorn. If you're in other parts of the world, I don't think it's a problem. Okay, in Europe, then right at the end of the day, towards midnight, the moon changes sign, but I don't think that's of real concern for you. Aquarius, you probably continue to take yourself quite seriously. I mean, you are a serious person. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, and at the moment with the moon in Virgo, also got Mars in Virgo, things are serious, and you understand that there's not much that can be taken for granted. And with that approach, you should be quite successful, and you can take action to stabilize things and to make things more secure for yourself. And you'll be helped by the fact that the moon is making a trine to Venus. And that moon trine Venus reminds you of what is important, and making sure that if things had been not done properly in the past, you can resolve them. And so that's looking good. But there is perhaps a possibility, Aquarius, that you maybe underestimate yourself, or you maybe think that just things are, too difficult, too complicated, and as a result you don't take action when actually there is a clear possibility for action. And the things you do, the things you say, the way you express yourself can really make a big difference. And at the moment, Aquarians can really have an impact. And yeah, it is what you say that matters. It's the way you communicate, and you really are able to grab people's attention. People listen. I mean, they will listen. Of course, if you say nothing, they won't listen. But you do have, so much to say, and deep down, that things are changing. And I think that things are changing for the better. That, however serious things are, they can't go on like this forever. There is going to soon enough be room for lightness and starting to explore real sort of possibilities. And we've got some sign changes coming up. Venus and Uranus are getting ready to change sign. On I think it's July the 7th. I think July the 7th is I think it's a Monday. So in about a week's time, we've got Uranus moving into Gemini. We've got Venus moving into Gemini in a few days' time, and you're starting to pick up on this. And so when these planets move into Gemini, it's good news for an Aquarian, because suddenly you see things in a new way, and you start to see what is possible, and you start to become aware of what you can do. And you'll no doubt, well, I think no doubt, there's always some doubt, but I think that you're going to be aware of what you can do to really make things happen. So right now, you should be aware of yourself and what you can do. And you have had some important insights over the last few days. Not all of these insights may have been pleasant, but it's all coming together. And if you express yourself, I think that you will make a powerful impression. People will listen. People will be excited, and they'll want more of the same. And so don't hold back, and you can still do some listening. I mean, if you feel that you're taking something too far and you're worried about whether you might be taking too much of a risk, you can get good feedback. I mean, some of the people around you are sensible without being narrow-minded, and I think that in many cases, you can trust them to give you guidance, but it's not a time when you should be doing what you're told, or just not moving because you think that other people wouldn't approve, because it is a time for movement. And the moon does change sign today. Well, if you're in the Americas, the moon changes sign today. This afternoon, the moon moves out of Virgo and into Libra. And that sign change, in one sense, is going to make you realize, what is possible. Perhaps before you hadn't realized all of this. You might have thought it was just about limitation. And so suddenly you see things in a new way. You're also aware of what could be holding you up, because when the moon moves into Libra, it makes an opposition to Saturn. So what's that about? And I think that moon opposition Saturn is a simultaneous process. On one hand, you start to be aware of possibilities. On the other hand, you are holding back. You're afraid of these possibilities. So moon opposition Saturn may just be about pure fear, and your fear of doing something different. And maybe you just have to get over that moon opposition Saturn. I mean, it's a short-lived aspect, that moon opposition Saturn, and by tomorrow and the day after, as the moon gets itself together in Libra, as we move to tomorrow is actually a first quarter moon. So tomorrow with the first quarter moon, that might really be a call for action, Aquarius, and you'll realize that that now is the time. But I'll be talking about that first quarter moon when I do your horoscope for tomorrow, Wednesday. Pisces, there is still quite a lot of activity in Virgo, in your opposite sign, and so that might say something about relationships and the other people in your life. Even if you don't know them very well, you'll see what kind of influence they have. And the moon is making a trine to Venus, and that moon trine Venus with moon in Virgo in your opposite sign, making a trine to Venus is going to really help smooth things along. And so, at least on an emotional level, I think that you can get on pretty well with people. Your presence and their presence will not clash, and that's all well and good. But when it actually comes to communication, to actually saying things, that might be where the problems start, because today is not great for getting your message across. I mean, you might try, but as soon as the words come out of your mouth, they just freeze. They don't go anywhere. They seem stuck. And that might be because you yourself are not entirely convinced. You say the words, but words without power, without energy, how far can they go? Probably not very far at all. And additionally, there is a question about whether other people really want to listen. You try your hardest, but people have their views, and if you try to engage with them intellectually, they just won't respond. So try as you might, communications might not get through. And so if you've got something important to say, whether it's verbally or in a written way through email or a text message, perhaps you should wait. Perhaps wait a day or two, and until the situation has cleared. It's just a passing problem, but while it's there, it could be very frustrating if you're trying to say something important. And so that's why it's probably best to just, with other people, just be with them, get used to their presence. Don't say anything important. Don't try and change anyone's mind. If you've got something important to say, in most cases, it can probably wait. So if you bear that in mind and you just enjoy the day, enjoy other people's company, but without having any expectations of them, then I think that things should be okay. But tomorrow things do change. Tomorrow perhaps things become more intense, more serious. The moon is starting to move into Libra. The moon is making an opposition to Saturn, and that means that there are things that need to be attended to. Maybe there are things which do have to be communicated, but we'll talk about that tomorrow when I do your horoscope for Wednesday. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 40, which is deliverance. And this hexagram doesn't move, no moving lines. So deliverance suggests a situation which is not good. It's a problematic situation where if you were to stay in it for too long, things could go badly wrong. They really could. And with deliverance, what it's really saying is that there is an escape. And so if you're not comfortable with something, you can see that things are going badly wrong, then don't feel you're stuck with it, because there is a clear exit. But the question is, how long is that exit going to last for? It might not last forever. I mean, there is a danger here, because you see there's no moving lines. Where does deliverance move to? Because there are no moving lines, it's absolutely possible that you see the escape, but you decide not to take the escape. And so you could end up being stuck, and you might miss your moment. So do think about that. Now, to give us some more details about this hexagram deliverance, we can look at the nuclear hexagram, when we knock out the top and the bottom lines. And so if we look at the nuclear hexagram for deliverance, the one in the middle, to give us more details, the nuclear hexagram we get is hexagram number 63, which is after completion. And with after completion, this is a situation where something has been done, where we have got to the far bank. We think we've reached a stage where we can now move on. But very often, once we've completed something, once we've made the transition, that's when the problems start. And that may say something about deliverance. So deliverance may be a situation where it was going quite well until quite recently. We thought we'd made the big steps, we'd crossed the river, and now it's not looking so good. And we so want to stay where we are. We've put this huge effort into getting somewhere, and so why would we want to go backwards? But having put all that effort in, we now are terrified about having to undo it all. But maybe we have to. Just because we've put all that effort in, it is that, what do they call it? The sunken cost fallacy. You think just because you put a huge amount of money into something that you should just carry on with it. It's rather like a sunken cost fallacy, with NATO and the West in the Ukraine, thinking that they put so much money, so much resources into Ukraine, into supporting Ukraine, that even though Russia is winning, you just need to keep going, because you don't want to lose that original investment. But sometimes if it's gonna all collapse, you need to just accept that you've lost that investment. So that may say something about, as an analogy, about this hexagram deliverance. So maybe you've overcommitted to something. You really regard something as being important psychologically because you put in that effort. There might be a sunken cost, but you have a chance. You have a chance to escape. And the question is, will you take that chance? Of course, this is a hexagram for just one day. It's certainly not advice about anything important. It's not financial advice, anything like that. But do consider how you might be able to exit something which you thought was going well, but now it's really not going so well. So that might be a way of looking at this hexagram. So now I want to look at AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I should start off by saying I don't have any opinion on her. I am an opinionated person. I have opinions all over the place, and that is often reflected in what I say astrologically. For example, yesterday I talked about Keir Starmer, and Keir Starmer is someone I can't stand. A lot of people can't stand him, and I'm sure that was reflected in what I said about his horoscope. But as far as AOC is concerned, I don't have any opinions. I don't suffer from AOC derangement syndrome in the same way that I don't suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. So I do think that I can look at her horoscope and what's going on in her life relatively objectively. So turning to AOC's chart, she is a Libran, and she turned 35 last birthday. So she was 30. She turned 35 on October the 13th, 1984. Sorry, 2024. Because 35 is an important age in American politics, because a lot of people are saying, oh well, she might be a candidate for the American presidency at some stage, and of course you've got to be 35 to stand for the president. I mean, I'm not making those kind of forecasts here, but you know. So here is her chart. She has Sagittarius rising, and she has a full moon, kind of. I mean, she's got her sun in Libra and the moon in Aries, and that moon is right on the IC. And with the, with AOC, it's important to look at that moon. I mean, I think with a female chart, the moon will become more prominent as time goes on. I mean, that's likely. So, yeah, it's easy to say, oh, she's a Libran because she's got Mercury, Mars and Sun in Libra, and clearly Libra has an impact. Librans can do very well in politics, but with that moon in Aries, if you wanted to characterize her personality with one sign, I would have said that probably the moon in Aries would be more effective, more descriptive than the sun in Libra. And her chart, it's applying to a full moon. And we did have another politician who had sun in Libra and moon in Aries, who I used to look at quite a lot. I don't really look at her chart anymore, and that was Kamala Harris. So you see, with Kamala Harris, she had the moon in Aries and the sun in Libra. Now, one of the reasons why Kamala Harris was such a disaster is because I think that her sun and the moon were too close to an opposition. You see, Kamala Harris had an exact sun-moon opposition. She was born exactly on the full moon. And I think that short-circuited her. I think that there was something completely enclosing her. I think maybe it was something to do with her relationship with her parents, or she couldn't express herself. And I think that sun-moon opposition in her case was just too close. Now, in AOC's case, clearly expression is not a problem, and that moon-sun opposition is not really making much of a problem for her. And so her moon is supposedly free. But the moon does link in with she's got moon opposition Mercury, and moon and Mercury on the midheaven, moon on the midheaven, moon on the IC, and so the very fact that she's got moon Mercury opposition each other, these are the two communication planets. Moon is about emotional communication, Mercury is more cerebral, and so those two planets suggests that sometimes the way she communicates can be abrasive, and a lot of people can't stand her and they get quite upset by what she says. But of course, for every person that hates her, there's another person that thinks she's absolutely wonderful. Now, when you're talking about politicians, it's very important to look at the outer planets. I mean, it's always important to look at the outer planets, even if people are not politicians. But politicians are, they're tools of the collective. AOC, might claim to be an individual. I'm sure she is an individual. I mean, she's got real personality, perhaps unlike Kamala Harris, but still, she's part of a political process, and she's got a role to play, and that role will become sort of more constrained if she starts to move up the political ladder. Okay, at the moment she's just a congresswoman. She might make a lot of noise, but she doesn't actually have a huge amount of power right now. But if she gets more power, then she would be more and more constrained. But still, she is reflecting something collectively, and I think it's very important with AOC to realize that she has a Jupiter-Saturn opposition. So she's got Saturn in Capricorn and Jupiter in Cancer. I mean, she's got a Jupiter return coming up, and I will be talking about her Jupiter return very soon. And so, I don't know if you were alive or if you remember 1989. I don't know what 1989 was like in the US, but certainly in Britain in 1989, things weren't great economically. So I certainly remember in the 1980s, there was a great boom in house prices in the UK in the 80s, and then right at the end of the 80s, house prices started to collapse, and they kept on collapsing through the 90s, through the first half, certainly the first half of the 90s. But that's the fact that with Jupiter-Saturn opposition, she was born, when the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was in 1980, 1981, as Ronald Reagan became president, and you had the 80s boom with the stock market. The stock market finally got itself together, and you had deregulation, and there was a lot of sort of economic excitement, and greed was good. And then in the late 80s, it started to go into crisis. This would have been, just after George Bush had been elected, because Reagan, 1980, beginning of 1989, George Bush Senior became president, and so she's really locked into that Jupiter-Saturn opposition, and the Jupiter-Saturn opposition does actually focus on the negativity of economic growth, that economic growth in the end can go too far. You can get a lot of inequality, and people aren't so focused on inequality when everything is fine, but inequality when things are falling apart, then people really start to focus on that. And I think the fact that she's born at the time of the Jupiter-Saturn opposition, really is very important. And her personal planets do to an extent link with it. She has the moon applying to a square of Saturn, it's applying to a square of Jupiter, and she's got Mars kind of making the T square there. So we should not neglect that Jupiter Saturn opposition, and also you've got sort of Neptune involved with it. And still, as a chart, a lot of it kind of makes sense. The fact that she's got Mars on the midheaven, she's got Mercury on the midheaven, she's got Sun in the 10th house. These are the kind of things you might expect from a politician. And if you take the Placidus house system, then she's got Saturn in Capricorn in the first house. So that indicates to me, if she's got Saturn in Capricorn in the first house, that she is focused. She's not necessarily just a flake, just going for whatever is fashionable at the moment. She does perhaps have a plan. So I don't think that from her chart you should necessarily underestimate her. So as far as what is happening at the moment with AOC. Now, this story that is doing the rounds. I mean, it's a pretty trivial story, because you can see that she was born in the Bronx, and she apparently went to the suburbs, Yorktown. I mean, I don't know anything about the geography of New York, but this has been used against her by her political enemies. She's claiming to be a local, with her she's representative for the 14th district, and she's a real sort of Bronx girl and all of that kind of stuff. But this has been questioned. I mean, it is trivial, but it does say something about her roots and her origins, and it might be disturbing to her. And she does have moon on the IC, and so it's kind of interesting that she's got Saturn and Neptune have moved into Aries. Of course, Neptune goes stationary retrograde, doesn't it? this week. It goes stationary retrograde, I think, at about 2 degrees 10 Aries. So it doesn't actually reach her moon, but she can still feel it. And I think that with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction close to her moon, close to her IC, and opposition her Mercury, she is. It is getting to her, I think. Whatever she says, however bold and brave she is in responding to these criticisms, it's having an impact. And it's reminding her of something, and it's also showing that, potentially she may be going into quite a difficult stage of her life, where there are things to resolve. And as far as her political career is concerned, she has got. She doesn't come up for election. I think she came up for election last year. So in Congress, they have to come up every 2 years. So she doesn't have to face an election until 2026. I think it's the beginning of November 2026. So that's not an immediate problem for her, but it might become a problem. And as far as some of the transits she's going on, okay, there is Saturn and Neptune hitting her moon. And we also have, of course, Neptune is opposition, it's also on her IC, and she's got Neptune and Saturn opposition her Mercury. So it is tough for her. And if you've got Saturn opposition your Mercury, there are things that you might feel down about. I think that Saturn is about to go retrograde. I don't think Saturn doesn't make the exact opposition to her Mercury. But if you look at Neptune goes retrograde over the weekend at 2 degrees 11 Aries. So she has got her Mercury at 2 degrees 14 Libra. And again, this might say something about this story, about her origins and her having to put a lot of energy into it. And with Neptune opposition Mercury, clearly a time where she has to be careful what she tweets, what she says. That might be an issue for her. But again, she doesn't have to face re-election until 2026. Then look at her Jupiter. Her Jupiter is at 10 degrees Capricorn, 10 degrees Cancer. So she's got a Jupiter return coming up, and so Jupiter conjunct Jupiter. What is that going to be about? When is her Jupiter return? Her Jupiter return is at the end of July. So Jupiter conjunct Jupiter, and she's going to also have Jupiter opposition Saturn. So Jupiter is rolling over her Jupiter Saturn opposition, and so Jupiter Saturn opposition, it's quite a political opposition. And so being a political opposition, it may highlight some of her political beliefs. It may also say something about the various relationships she's in. She has Jupiter in the Placidus 7th house, and so a Jupiter return might well say something about the relationship she's in. She's got a partner. I can't remember his name. I think he's a web developer. So may say something about the development of that relationship. But the Jupiter return is also a moment. It's that moment when Jupiter returns to the place it was when you were born. And we don't normally set up Jupiter return charts, perhaps because they're rare, because they only happen every 12 years. Because of retrograde, sometimes you can get more than one Jupiter return at a time. But, there is that question. Do Jupiter returns work? Now, before looking at AOC's Jupiter return, I just wanted to look at another person's Jupiter return, and that is the return of Princess Diana. So Princess Diana was born on July the 1st, 1961. And so Princess Diana, when she died, was of a similar age to AOC. So Diana was, she was 36 when she died. and AOC is going to be 36 next birthday. I'm not, by the way, I'm not saying that anything bad is going to happen to AOC, but I was just using it as an example of two women of fairly similar ages. And so Diana has her Jupiter at 5 degrees Aquarius. So if Jupiter returns really work, we would have expected to see a dramatic Jupiter return for Diana. So here's a chart of Diana's Jupiter return, which took place on February the 12th, 1997, which would have been 6 months or so before she died. And I think that Jupiter return is certainly telling us something, because it's interesting that at the time of that Jupiter return, Jupiter was exactly conjunct Uranus, and there was a Mercury-Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in the looks like it was in the ninth house. Something happening abroad, but then she's always abroad. But Jupiter conjunct Uranus, we see Jupiter Uranus as being about freedom and a relief that something is over. So that might be how she felt when the Jupiter return happened. But then Uranus is also the planet of accidents, and so you could literally say Jupiter conjunct Uranus, that's her having an accident, and so it's about an abrupt event. So yeah, maybe there's some evidence of a Jupiter return working. You might also notice that at the time of her Jupiter return, true black moon Lilith was very close to her IC, and so that might have been the end of the matter. In fact, if you look at her Jupiter return, her Venus was at 1138 Aquarius, and her Venus was exactly it's very difficult to see this chart because you've got this big build up in Aquarius, but Venus was exactly on the midheaven, and true black moon Lilith was exactly on the IC. So in a strange way, that Jupiter return accurately describes what happened to her. Would I have been able to predict that on the basis of that chart? No, I don't think so. I would have looked at that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and I probably would have said, oh, that's her being free, finding someone new, Venus on the midheaven. Venus on the midheaven gets a lot of attention. She got a lot of attention, and her death got her a lot of attention. So I think you could argue that this chart for Diana's Jupiter return does indicate that maybe we should be looking at Jupiter returns, which takes us to AOC's Jupiter return. So here's AOC's Jupiter return. I've set this for the Bronx, where she was born. And AOC's Jupiter return is actually pretty good. She has got North Node on the midheaven. And she's got Jupiter rising, so that Jupiter is exactly rising at the time of her Jupiter return. So you might say on the basis of that from July the 26th onwards, this maybe we're even talking about the next 12 years, certainly the next few years. This is a time when she will continue to have a sort of a high public profile, and having an exalted Jupiter rising, strikes me as being a pretty good sign for the future. And now I want to look at things from a Vedic perspective, and so here is here. Let's find her Vedic chart. So here is AOC's Vedic chart, and the Vedic chart, certainly gives us some more information about that Saturn transit to her moon. But looking at her Vedic chart, she has Venus in Scorpio in her Vedic chart. So in her Western chart, I think she's got Venus in, let's get this right, in her Western chart. Yeah, in her Western chart, she's got Venus in Sagittarius. But in her Vedic chart, because, we take off 24 degrees with a Vedic chart, That does go back to Scorpio, but still, it's in the first house, and in Vedic astrology, they don't really use the concept of detriment. So I know Venus in Scorpio, doesn't sound good from a Western perspective, but I think from a Vedic point of view, it's not an especially big deal having Venus in Scorpio. But Venus in the first house, in one sense, that is a good Venus, but we shouldn't forget that Venus rules the 12th. So her 12th house is covered by Libra. So Venus, ruler of the 12th, is in the first, and it's also ruler of the 7th. The other, but from a strength point of view, her Venus is one of the strongest planets in her chart. It's her second strongest. Her Jupiter is regarded as being her strongest planet, using Shadbala, even though it's in the 8th house. And so why Venus matters is because it's her dasha ruler. So at the end of 2023, on December the 20th, 2023, she entered her Venus dasha, and the Venus dasha lasts a long time. I mean, it lasts 20 years. So for the next 20 years, her life is ruled by Venus. And does that indicate that she's going to be successful? Is going to continue to be successful? I mean, she's had her big successes, in terms of getting elected for the first time during her Ketu dasha. Her Ketu dasha ended in 2023, and so she's got Ketu in the 10th house in her Vedic chart. So Ketu really wants to be successful. That is Ketu. It's the tail of the dragon, and so that propelled her to the heights, propelled her into Congress, and now she's got to deal with Venus, and now she's got to perhaps create some sort of alliances for herself, and so this might be a case if you're into remedies. Remembering Venus does rule the 12th house. Venus is not unambiguously good. I mean, it does have a few problems, and so Venus could probably be strengthened. So if one was using remedies, she might want to fast on Fridays, or she might want to wear a gemstone connected with Venus, or if she was really into the whole Hindu system, she could have priests praying for her in India to boost her Venus. So there are all sorts of practical things she could do to boost her Venus. And I think if you believe in the Vedic system, and of course the Vedic system is so wedded to the Hindu religion, I think that there are certainly things she could do there. And we can look, she stays in her Venus major dasha, Venus minor dasha through until 2027, because she's up for election in 2026 and for re-election. So 2027 she moves into her Venus major dasha, Sun minor dasha, and then 2028 she's got Venus major dasha, Moon minor dasha. I mean, of course, in 2028, she will be. How old will she be in 2028? She turns 20. So she'll be 20. She'll be 30. What? She'll be 38. She'll be 38 in 2027. And so, there were some rumours, for example, about AOC being pregnant. I think at the end of last year, and they were not true. And so when she got that moon in the 5th house is very much, or can be, about having children, and so she can have children before, she can have children afterwards. But that Venus major dasha, Moon minor dasha, starting April 2028, it's not for another few years, but that would be a time if you were just predicting for someone who wasn't a politician. I mean, she can be a politician as well, but when the moon sort of manifests like that, but so between April 28 and December 2029, that is a time for having children, for pregnancy, and so that might be a note for the future, but that doesn't mean she can't have children before 2028 or after 2028. But that seems to be a time of maximum probability from a Vedic perspective. But what perhaps is most important from a Vedic view right now is the fact that Saturn has gone into Pisces. So sidereal Saturn went into Pisces. When did it go into Pisces? Quite recently, and that was in sort of end of March, beginning of April. And so she has the moon in Pisces in her Vedic chart. Okay, it's moon in Aries in her natal chart. So that means that she is in the central phase of Sadhi-Sati. So Sadhi-Sati is when transiting Saturn is in the same sign as your moon, and when it is in the sign before the moon, and when it is the sign after your moon. So for a quarter of your life you're in Sadhi-Sati, and of course some Vedic astrologers like to make a big thing about Sadhi-Sati, and there might be a financial element to that. If you want to make people worried about Sadhi-Sati, then you can get them to pay for prayers and that kind of thing, and antidotes. So that's a good way of getting some extra money. But we already saw in her Western chart that Saturn is starting to make a conjunction to her moon, and so now she's got Saturn in the same sign as her moon, and Saturn is making an opposition to her Sun, Mars, and Mercury. So Saturn is actually causing her a lot of problems at the moment, and maybe they will continue. And she stays in Sadhi-Sati, I believe, or until the beginning of 2028. So over the next few years, while Saturn moves into sidereal Pisces, she might have some serious challenges, and we also have to remember that she's got an election coming up next year, and so what kind of pressures will she be under? I mean, I'll quickly go back to the Western chart and look at her election. So as far as I know, she's up for election on November the 3rd. So this is just a 9 o'clock in the evening chart. There's no particular special time for it. So here is the chart for roughly the evening of the election, when the results will be coming through. And I just thought I'd just look at her transits for this election. It could be quite an important time for her. Look at Neptune. Neptune is moving slowly, and Neptune at the end of 2026 will be pretty much where it is now. On November the 3rd, it's at 2 degrees 1 Aries. So she's going to have Neptune opposition her Mercury at the time of the election. And of course, this assumes she actually gets through to the election, because remember, she's got to go through a primary first. So maybe she won't get as far as the election. I'm not making a formal prediction here, but if she gets as far as the election, you can see that, with Neptune opposition her Mercury, that's putting a lot of pressure on her, and it's undermining her. And Neptune is conjunct her moon, and so she's got Saturn still pretty close to the IC, and Saturn is aspecting all of these planets up there. So that could be an issue for her, this election. Plus, the North Node return, and so with the North Node return, she needs to think about what is it all about? What is her destiny? Where is she going? And from a solar arc directed view, so looking at AOC's solar arc directions, then I found them somewhere. There's her solar arc directions, and seeing what's happening. The solar arc direction, which I think might be important, is her midheaven. So her midheaven at the moment, her solar arc directed midheaven, is currently at 12 degrees 1 Scorpio. So by the time of her election, it will be at about 13.5 Scorpio. So it's getting close to her Pluto. So her solar arc directed midheaven moving onto her Pluto around the time of the election, not just the general election, but the primary election as well. Yeah, that might indicate some rethinking. So with the Sadi period and other things going on, and again, I'm not making a formal prediction, but I think she needs to take this election very seriously, because I don't think it's guaranteed that she's going to win. Now, one final point I want to make about AOC is the fact that she does have a Jupiter-Saturn opposition in her chart, which I've already mentioned. But it might well be that AOC is geared to the Jupiter-Saturn opposition. The Jupiter-Saturn opposition may be an energy that she really relates to, that she might thrive on. And Jupiter-Saturn oppositions can be about an economic undermining. When we get Jupiter-Saturn oppositions, things can fall apart economically. And there is a Jupiter-Saturn opposition coming up in 2029. And it's not that this Jupiter-Saturn opposition aspects anything in her chart, but it's just that she might be just comfortable with that Jupiter-Saturn energy. And my view of this Jupiter-Saturn opposition, which will take place, so it will take place probably after the Republicans have won again. I mean, I'm going on a sort of working hypothesis that the Republicans are going to win the 2028 election. And I'm not making an absolute prediction on that, but I think it very likely that the Republicans are going to win the next election, probably be a Vance presidency. And but then that Jupiter-Saturn opposition, the thing is going to fall apart. And I think with this Jupiter-Saturn opposition at 2029, I'm thinking that the American people, is going to move to the left in maybe quite a big way. And, all of this sort of democratic socialist stuff that people are being, most people think it's far-fetched, maybe weird ideas like a wealth tax, whatever, 70% tax. Yeah, it might seem far-fetched now, but in 2029, 2030, may not be far-fetched at all, as America moves to the left with this Jupiter-Saturn opposition. And so AOC, with her Jupiter-Saturn opposition, when that Jupiter-Saturn opposition arrives at 2029, it's going to be her time. Again, not because of anything in her chart, but she will be familiar with this kind of energy. And people like AOC may thrive in 2029. So I don't know how you see that. You might see that as good news. You might find that worrying, or you might just see it just me spouting garbage. Who knows? But it's just a thought. And I think, so we should be starting to prepare for that Jupiter-Saturn opposition, because I really do think that the American economy is going to be under real pressure then, and I do think that people like AOC are going to start to become important, and their opinions are going to be starting to be taken seriously. And it is 100 years ago, 2029, when you had the Wall Street crash, and because of course it was Roosevelt became president in 1933, a very interventionist government, and so whoever wins the 1932 election. I think the person who wins that 1932 election is going to be a Democrat and is going to be quite an interventionist Democrat. But don't worry, that doesn't happen for a few more years. So anyway, thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.